A German shepherd stood in the snow, hearing every voice around him and obeying none of them. The police sergeant sent to evaluate him expected stubbornness, fear, maybe even a reason to keep people away. Then one quiet movement of a hand changed everything the officer thought he understood. The dog had never stopped listening. The world had simply forgotten how to speak his language. And the closer the sergeant came to understanding him, the harder one question became, did love mean keeping him? Sometimes the deepest loyalty is not proven by who holds the leash, but by knowing when to let it go. Share your own touching or unforgettable animal story with us, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. January sunlight made Saranac Lake look warmer than it was. Fresh snow lay clean across roofs, parked cars, porch rails, and the low hills beyond town, reflecting so much light that Sergeant Micah Tolland had to narrow his blue-gray eyes behind the windshield of his patrol SUV. The dashboard read 12 degrees. The road surface looked dry in places and treacherous in others. At 9:18 a.m., dispatch interrupted the routine traffic chatter. Unit 3, loose dog complaint near Lake Flower Avenue and River Street. Large German shepherd. Caller reports aggressive behavior toward pedestrians. Micah reached for the radio. Unit 3 responding. He had been a police officer long enough to know that the word aggressive could mean almost anything. Sometimes it meant teeth. Sometimes it meant barking. Sometimes it meant a frightened person had seen a 70-pound dog move faster than expected. He turned toward Lake Flower. By the time Micah reached the intersection, traffic had slowed in both directions. A German shepherd stood near the edge of the sidewalk. Not running, not barking. Standing. The dog was large. Dark sable along the back, with warm tan coloring across the chest and legs. Winter fur thickened the neck and shoulders, giving the animal a heavier silhouette than the muscular body underneath actually carried. A small notch marked the outer edge of the right ear. The dog wore a black collar with an old rectangular brass tag. No leash. 20 feet away, a middle-aged man in a red ski jacket had one arm stretched protectively in front of a younger woman beside him. "That's the dog," the man called as Micah stepped out. "Keep him away from us." Micah shut the vehicle door without slamming it. The German shepherd turned. The dog's ears moved first toward the sound of the door, then toward Micah himself. That answered one question immediately. The dog could hear. Micah kept his hands visible and his movements ordinary. "Sir, stay where you are for a moment." "We were just walking," the man said. "He came right at us." The younger woman, probably his daughter, looked more shaken than angry. She was in her 20s, bundled in a white down coat, one glove missing from her left hand. "He didn't bite," she said. Her father glanced at her. "He didn't have to." Micah studied the dog again. The German shepherd stood broadside to the pedestrians, body placed almost exactly between them and the curb. His head was lower than neutral, but there was no forward charge now, no snapping, no frantic pacing, just stillness. Micah had seen defensive dogs, terrified dogs, overstimulated dogs. This looked different. "Sit," Micah said. The right ear flicked. Nothing else happened. "Sit." The dog looked directly at him. Micah changed tone. "Stay." Still nothing. The eyes were amber brown, alert enough that Micah found the lack of response irritating in a strangely professional way. The dog was not distracted. The dog was looking right at him. "Come." Nothing. A second municipal unit pulled up behind Micah's SUV. Officer Eric Phelps climbed out and began redirecting a pickup that had slowed to watch. "Hold up," Phelps called to the driver. Phelps raised one gloved hand, palm outward. The German shepherd sat. Micah stopped. The movement was so immediate he wondered whether he had imagined the connection. Phelps was already focused on traffic and had not noticed. The dog remained seated. Micah said, "Stay." No response. He looked toward Phelps's raised hand, then back at the dog. Interesting. A county animal control truck arrived a minute later. Owen Braith stepped down from the cab carrying a slip lead but no catch pole. At 52, Owen had the heavy, practical build of someone who had spent years handling animals that outweighed their owner's expectations. His close-cropped salt and pepper hair showed beneath a dark knit cap, and an orange climbing-style carabiner bounced lightly against his utility belt. Owen looked at the dog before looking at anyone else. What did he actually do? The man in the red jacket pointed across the sidewalk. He lunged at us. Contact? No. Teeth? I don't know. It happened fast. Growling? The man hesitated. No. Owen nodded once. Not agreement, inventory. The younger woman pulled out her phone. I recorded some of it. Micah moved beside her while Owen approached the dog in a wide arc. The video began with a camera pointed toward the ground. A shoe appeared. Snow. A confused voice. Then the frame jerked upward. Rook, Micah did not know the dog's name yet, crossed the sidewalk in 3 quick strides. From that angle it looked bad. A large German shepherd moving directly toward 2 people. The dog stopped several feet short, swung sideways, then planted himself across their path. The video ended when the woman backed away. No contact, Micah said. No, she replied. But you believed he might come closer. Yes. Her answer was immediate enough that Micah did not question the fear behind it. Fear did not require a bite to be real. Owen had reached the dog by then. Instead of reaching immediately for the collar, he let the loop of the slip lead hang near his knee. The German shepherd watched Owen's shoulders, then his right hand. Owen paused. Micah noticed that too. Know this dog? Micah asked. Unfortunately. Owen turned the slip lead so the loop was visible, lowered it without grabbing, and waited. The German shepherd allowed Owen to guide the loop over his head, no resistance. No excitement either. He's Rook, Owen said. 5-year-old male. Temporary foster placement. From where? Local rescue partner. Owners in rehabilitation. The man in the red jacket stared. You're telling me somebody's been placing that dog in homes? Temporary homes, Owen corrected. Not adoptions. How many? Owen exhaled through his nose. 6. Micah looked at him. In how long? 7 weeks, give or take. That changed the shape of the scene. 6 homes in less than 2 months should have produced a thicker history than what stood in front of them now. What were the failures? Micah asked. Depends who you ask. Aggression? No. Property damage? No. Bites? None reported. Micah glanced at Rook. Then why 6? Owen looked at the dog before answering. They all say the same thing. Rook was watching Owen's hand, not his eyes, not the leash. His hand. He doesn't listen. The phrase should have made the situation simpler. Instead, it made Micah look at the dog again. Rook had heard a patrol door close from 20 feet away. He had tracked Phelps's traffic gesture from farther than that. He had responded to movement instantly, but spoken commands seemed to pass through the air without meaning. Micah had spent most of his career believing clarity solved half of human conflict. Give people a direction they could understand. Keep the words short. Keep the voice level. Reduce confusion. Rook had just complicated that principle without making a sound. A gust sent powder snow skittering across the street. Owen handed the lead to an assistant who had arrived with him. I'll take him back to holding while we sort the complaint. The man in red stepped forward. Sort it out? He threatened us. Micah raised a hand slightly. Sir, nobody is dismissing what happened. He came at my daughter, and your statement will reflect that. What happens to the dog? Owen answered this time. A dangerous dog complaint can move to a hearing if there's enough basis to proceed. A judge makes the determination. Not me. Not Sergeant Tolland. The man seemed dissatisfied with the fact that no one could produce an immediate verdict. Micah understood that too. People liked decisions most when they were frightened. Ambiguity felt like negligence. He took the man's information, then the daughter's, then asked them to walk him through their approach to the intersection from the beginning. They had come from the pharmacy. They had crossed River Street. The dog had been farther ahead near a snowbank. They had continued toward the corner. Then Rook had moved. Micah walked the route himself after Owen loaded the dog. The intersection had been sanded that morning, but snowplow spray had pushed a thin white crust back over portions of the sidewalk. Micah stepped where the pedestrians had been heading. His left boot shifted half an inch. He stopped. Below the powder was a dark, transparent sheen, black ice. A bright orange municipal grit marker stood half buried beside the curb, nearly invisible beneath fresh plow spray. Micah looked back toward the spot where Rook had planted himself, directly between the pedestrians and the slick section. Coincidence was still the cleanest explanation. A loose dog could move for a dozen reasons. Arousal, fear, curiosity, previous training. Micah was not going to invent intention because the ending looked convenient, but he was not going to erase the detail either. He returned to his SUV and opened the incident report on the mounted computer. The first available classification included the word aggressive. Micah rested his fingers over the keyboard. He watched the phone video once more. 3 fast strides. Turn. Block. Stop. No pursuit when the pedestrians retreated. No contact. He deleted the classification before saving anything. Under behavioral description, he typed only what he could defend. Large German Shepherd moved rapidly toward 2 pedestrians, stopped several feet away, positioned body across pedestrian path, remained stationary after pedestrians withdrew. No physical contact observed or reported. He added the condition of the sidewalk. Possible black ice beneath fresh snow. Then he added something he almost removed. Dog appeared responsive to visual movement while showing limited response to verbal commands. Micah sat back. Across the intersection, Phelps was still directing traffic. Hand up. Cars stopped. Hand forward. Cars moved. A simple language everyone understood because everyone had agreed what the movements meant. The thought stayed with Micah longer than he wanted. At the temporary holding facility later that morning, Owen led Rook through a chain-link gate. Micah had come only to leave a copy of the preliminary report. That was what he told himself. Rook entered the enclosure without resisting. Owen removed the lead, checked the latch, and stepped away. "Owner's name is Calvin Sutter," Owen said. "His niece is handling temporary care while he's recovering." "Recovering from what?" "Winter accident. I'll get you the proper release information if this moves forward." Micah nodded. That was enough for today. He turned toward the exit. Behind him, there was no bark, no scratching at the gate, no attempt to follow. Micah reached for the push bar on the door. Something made him glance back. Rook stood inside the enclosure. The German Shepherd was not looking at Micah's face. His gaze had settled lower. On Micah's bare right hand wrapped around the metal bar. Micah moved his fingers. Rook's ears came forward. Micah went still. So did the dog. For a moment, neither moved. Then Micah opened the door and stepped into the white January light, carrying a question he had not yet found a place for in his report. By 9 the next morning, Rook had already failed 3 spoken commands without doing anything wrong. Sergeant Micah Tolland stood outside the indoor observation pen at the county animal control facility, while Owen Braith wrote times on a yellow legal pad. "Sit," Owen said. Rook watched him, down. The German Shepherd's ears shifted toward the sound of a kennel latch farther down the hall. "Come." "Nothing." Owen scratched a line beneath the last entry. "He hears all of it. I know." A stainless bowl slipped from a counter in the prep room. Rook turned immediately. A volunteer opened a refrigerator. His nose lifted. Someone rolled a metal cart down the corridor, and his eyes tracked it before the wheels even came into view. Micah folded his arms. So hearing isn't the issue. Never thought it was. Owen was wearing a slate-gray work shirt beneath his brown utility jacket, the orange carabiner on his belt bright against the dull concrete room. He had the unhurried manner of someone who knew that animals became harder to read the moment humans grew impatient. He closed the legal pad. "I requested an independent veterinary behaviorist. For 1 sidewalk complaint, for a 5-year-old shepherd with 6 failed placements and a possible hearing coming." Micah looked through the wire panel. Rook stood calmly near the center of the enclosure. "No aggression history. That's what the paperwork says. You don't trust it? I trust what it says. I also trust what it doesn't say." Owen handed Micah a folder. The 6 foster reports were clipped together in chronological order. Micah read the first one standing up. Quiet in home. No destructive behavior. House-trained. Eats after room settles. Does not reliably respond to name. The second, good with visitors. No resource guarding. Frequently waits near exterior doors. Difficult to redirect verbally. The third, no incidents with neighboring dogs. Ignores recall. Watches movement closely. The fourth had a handwritten note beneath the formal checklist. Feels like he is waiting for someone else to tell him what to do. Micah read that sentence twice. By the 6th report, the language had changed. Not dangerous, not unmanageable, disconnected. Owen tapped the folder. People keep using emotional words because they don't have behavioral ones. He's been moved 6 times. Temporary placements. Still 6 houses. Exactly. The side door opened before Micah could answer. A woman entered carrying a cognac leather document folio against her chest and a forest green scarf looped twice around her neck. Dana Sutter was 41, with copper auburn hair cut blunt at the jaw and the look of a person who had spent too many recent mornings answering calls she did not want. She saw Rook first. Her expression softened, then tightened again. "Is he okay?" "He's fine," Owen said. Dana let out a breath. "I got your message about the complaint." Micah introduced himself. Dana nodded, then immediately began pulling papers from the folio. "I have the temporary care, authorization, Calvin's medical release, the rescue agreement, and every foster intake form. I brought veterinary records too, although those should already be on file." Owen gave Micah a glance. The paperwork was armor. Micah recognized the habit. Different uniform, same instinct. Dana noticed. "I know what this looks like." Micah said nothing. 6 homes. She pressed her lips together. "My apartment building has a 50-pound limit. Rook is almost twice that. Calvin can't live alone yet, and the first foster family had to travel unexpectedly. Then the second said he never bonded. The third thought he was depressed. The fourth had another dog that kept trying to play with him. The fifth, you don't have to defend every placement," Owen said. Dana stopped. Her fingers tightened around the folio. "I wasn't trying to get rid of him. No one had accused her of it." That made the sentence heavier. Dana looked through the enclosure. Rook had moved closer to the gate. "I thought if I found the right house, eventually he would settle." "Did he?" Micah asked. Dana gave him a tired look. "If he had, we wouldn't be here." A kennel technician entered carrying folded towels. Micah raised his right hand without thinking. "Hold on." The technician stopped. So did Rook. The dog had been walking toward Dana. One front paw remained slightly ahead of the other, frozen mid-step. Micah lowered his hand. Rook completed the step. Owen's head came up. Dana stared. Micah lifted his hand again. Palm angled differently this time. Rook remained standing. Micah rotated his wrist, lowered the hand a few inches. Rook sat. Dana's folio slipped half an inch against her coat. "What did you do?" "I'm not sure." Micah tried another small motion. Owen stepped between him and the enclosure. "That's enough." Micah frowned. "We just got a response. We got 2. So if those movements mean something to him, random guessing isn't useful. We could be telling him 3 things at once." Micah looked at Rook. The shepherd had not become excited. He was watching their hands with the focused patience of someone waiting for a conversation to become coherent. Dana's face had changed. Not relief. Something closer to realization. All 6 families kept saying his name louder. Owen said nothing. Dana looked down at her own hands. "I did too." The sentence landed quietly. She had been trying to help. That was precisely why it hurt. The front office door opened again, followed by a brief gust of cold air. A woman in a deep teal wool coat entered carrying a weather-resistant tablet under one arm. She pulled off one glove with her teeth, tucked it into a pocket, and signed something to the receptionist before speaking. "Mara Quinlan. I'm supposed to meet facilities at 10. The receptionist pointed down the hall. "Animal Control Access Review? That's me." Mara was 36, slim, dark-haired, her shoulder-length curls pulled loosely behind her neck. Her expressions changed quickly and clearly when she spoke, not exaggerated but precise. She had been deaf since childhood and worked as the village's accessibility consultant for winter emergency planning. She noticed the cluster outside Rook's enclosure. Then she noticed the dog. "Am I interrupting?" "Probably," Owen said, "but maybe usefully." Micah explained what they had just observed. Mara watched Rook for nearly a minute before asking anyone to repeat anything. That impressed Micah. Most people saw a problem and immediately tried to touch it. Mara waited. Then she raised one hand and gave Rook a common ASL sign. No response. She tried another. Rook's ears shifted, but his body did not. Mara looked at Micah. "He doesn't know ASL." Dana seemed disappointed. Mara caught it. "That's not bad news." "You think he understands some kind of signs?" "I think you're asking the wrong question." Micah leaned against the wall. "Which is, whether he understands signs." She nodded toward Rook. "He understands visual information. That doesn't mean he speaks my language." Micah looked at the enclosure. Mara continued. "People hear hand signals and think there's one universal system. There isn't. Dog trainers make their own. Search teams adapt them. Families invent gestures without realizing it. Context matters. Shoulder position matters. Where you're facing matters. Owen nodded. That would explain why he ignored the first motion, and why he responded when Sergeant Tolan changed his wrist. Micah looked at his own hand. Mara smiled slightly. Congratulations, your wrist has better communication skills than the rest of you. Dana laughed once despite herself. It was the first easy sound in the room. An hour later, the four of them were driving toward Adirondack Valley Rehabilitation Center. Rook remained with animal control. Micah preferred it that way. He wanted information before more experiments. Calvin Sutter was waiting in a sunlit therapy lounge overlooking a courtyard piled with snow. He looked smaller than Micah expected. At 69, Calvin was lean rather than frail, white hair cut short, a neat white mustache above a mouth that seemed permanently prepared for a dry remark. A graphite walker stood in front of his chair. His right hand trembled faintly when he reached for a small whiteboard resting beside him. Dana kissed his cheek. "You look better," Calvin wrote. "Liar," Dana smiled. "See? Better." His eyes moved to Micah and Owen, then to Mara. Introductions took a little longer because Calvin's speech tired quickly. He could talk, but only in short stretches before his throat tightened. When that happened, he used the whiteboard instead. Micah began with the intersection. Calvin listened without interrupting. When Micah described Rook responding to traffic gestures and hand position, Calvin closed his eyes briefly. Not surprise, recognition. "You trained him visually?" Micah asked. Calvin nodded. "Mostly." His voice was rough and economical. "Why?" Calvin pointed through the window toward the snow outside. "Wind." Then he tapped his ear. "Machines." He wrote the rest. "Helmets, hoods, distance." Dana looked between them. Calvin continued writing. "You can shout at wind if you like." Wind never listened. Owen smiled. "Volunteer ice rescue?" Calvin nodded again. For years, he had led a volunteer winter response team around Lake Flower and nearby frozen waterways. Rook had started accompanying him as a young dog, not as a formal police K-9, not as a military animal, but as a working partner in training exercises, shoreline searches, equipment runs, and boundary drills. Calvin held up his hand, flat palm, then changed the angle. Rook would stop. 2 fingers extended toward a direction. Rook would move, hand close to the chest, then outward. Different meaning. Micah watched carefully. "Standard system?" Calvin shook his head. "Some," he wrote, "some rescue, some mine." Rook learned both. Mara leaned forward. "That's why approximations sometimes work." Calvin looked at her. Mara signed while Dana quietly voiced for Micah and Owen when needed. "You built a visual vocabulary around the work." Calvin smiled. "Exactly." Micah remembered the phrase from the Foster reports. "He doesn't listen." The problem now seemed almost embarrassingly simple, but simple explanations often arrived only after expensive mistakes. Why wasn't any of this in his Foster paperwork? Calvin's smile disappeared. Dana answered before he could. "Because I didn't know." Calvin looked at her. Dana went still. "When you got hurt, I went to the hospital. Then the case manager needed forms. Your landlord needed an answer. The rescue needed vaccination records. And I needed somewhere for Rook by that night." Her voice became quieter. "I knew he had worked with you. I didn't know you had an entire command system." Calvin lifted the whiteboard. "Bothus." Dana nodded slowly. "The old signal cards." Calvin pointed at her. She closed her eyes. "They're still there." For several seconds nobody spoke. Not because they had uncovered a secret, because they had discovered how easily something essential could disappear beneath paperwork, schedules, medical appointments, housing rules, and people doing their best. Micah looked at Calvin. "If we teach the foster handlers the system, that may help." Calvin studied him for a long time. Then he picked up the marker. His hand shook slightly as he wrote. "Don't make him easy by making him forget." Micah read it. Calvin erased the last word, rewrote the sentence more carefully, and turned the board around again. "Don't teach him to forget me just to make him easier for someone else." Dana looked away first. Micah did not. He had come there looking for an explanation that could fit into an incident file. What Calvin had given him was something less convenient. Rook had not failed 6 homes because nobody cared enough. Maybe everyone had cared. Maybe caring had never been the missing part. Understanding had. Micah buttoned his patrol jacket before they left the rehabilitation center. Outside, the afternoon light had turned the snowbanks pale blue. Behind the glass doors, Calvin remained beside his walker, with the whiteboard resting on his knees. Micah could still see the faint shadow of the erased sentence beneath the new one. Some things disappeared from a page more easily than they disappeared from the life built around them. The boathouse had not been abandoned. That was the first thing Micah noticed. Abandoned places gathered disorder. Doors warped, tools migrated, dust thickened around objects nobody expected to touch again. Calvin Sutter's old volunteer rescue boathouse looked instead like a room someone had meant to return to next Tuesday and simply never had. Snow pressed against the lower windows. A red plastic sled leaned beneath a row of flotation jackets. Coiled ropes hung from labeled hooks. An old thermos sat beside a battery charger that had been unplugged long ago. Dana stood inside the doorway with Calvin's key still in her hand. "I thought this place would be worse." Owen brushed snow from his boots. "Worse how?" "I don't know, Satter." He looked around. "Give it a minute." Micah moved toward the far wall. A wide plywood board had been mounted above a workbench. Across it were black marker drawings of hands, arrows, body positions, and short block letter labels. Wait, return, search. Boundary. Safe, home. There were nearly 20 in all. Some used a flat palm. Others depended on 2 fingers, the angle of a wrist, or the direction the handler's shoulders faced. Several had small notes beneath them. Close distance. Use left side in high wind. Do not repeat rapidly. Micah stared at the last instruction. Owen joined him. "Well," Owen said, "that explains why half those foster families probably drove him crazy." Dana grimaced. "I told one of them to repeat commands until he responded." "You didn't know. I'm starting to dislike that sentence." Owen glanced at her. "It can be true without making you feel better." Dana set her leather folio on the workbench. The room contained no hidden revelation, no locked cabinet full of secrets. Just evidence of an ordinary system that had once worked because 2 living creatures had practiced it every week. A shelf near the door held dog gear, a faded black working harness, a long line, 2 orange bumpers used for retrieval drills, a brass water bowl with rook scratched into the bottom. Dana picked up the harness. A few dark sable hairs still clung to the lining. She rubbed one between 2 fingers. "I came here after Calvin's accident." Micah looked over. "For this equipment? No, for his insurance card." Her mouth tightened. "I walked right past all of this." She put the harness down carefully. At the hospital they needed medication lists, insurance numbers, emergency contacts. His landlord wanted to know how long he'd be gone. The rescue needed vaccination records for Rook. "I was looking for papers." Her eyes moved to the signal board. "So I found papers." Micah understood the distinction. Important things did not always look important when an emergency rearranged the order of the world. Owen photographed board 4, the behavioral file. "Any route records?" Dana pointed toward a dented metal cabinet beneath the windows. Inside were weather logs, volunteer schedules, maintenance sheets, and laminated maps of Lake Flower. Micah spread the maps across the workbench. Colored lines traced shoreline routes, blue for equipment checks, red for ice access points, yellow for public foot traffic near winter events. Small black squares marked designated hold locations. Owen leaned closer. "Boundary points? Looks like it." Dana moved beside them. Her finger stopped over one square. "That's River and Lake Flower." Micah knew before she finished. The intersection from the complaint. He pulled up the photograph from his incident file on his phone. Snowbank, curb. Orange grit marker. Rook's position. The old map placed a boundary checkpoint almost exactly there. Owen tapped the map. "What was the purpose?" Dana shook her head. "I don't know." Micah opened one of the training binders. Boundary drill, pedestrian control. The description was simple. During public winter events, Rook had been trained to hold a line at marked locations, while Calvin or another volunteer redirected people away from temporary hazard zones. The dog was not expected to touch anyone. He was not trained to chase. He was taught to move laterally across a path, stop, and wait for a release. Micah reread the paragraph. 3 fast strides, turn, block, stop. The phone video from the intersection played differently in his mind now. Not harmless. A large shepherd moving quickly toward strangers could still frighten people, but structured, recognizable. Owen seemed to arrive at the same conclusion. That complaint still exists. I know. Training history explains behavior. Doesn't erase public impact. I know. Owen gave him a sideways glance. Just checking. You've got the face. What face? The one cops get when facts start becoming personal. Dana almost smiled. Micah ignored both of them. He turned to the foster addresses in the file. The first was 3 blocks from downtown, the second near Broadway, the third beside Church Street. One after another, nearly every temporary home sat within walking distance of some portion of Calvin's old winter patrol route. Dana looked at the map. Oh, Micah pointed to the first address. Where did they walk him? Downtown, usually around the lake. Second address, same. Third, Dana hesitated. She said Rook kept pulling toward River Street. Micah looked up. Pulling? Not hard. More like choosing that direction every time they reached an intersection. The fourth family had reported that Rook repeatedly stopped outside a closed municipal storage shed. The map identified it as an old equipment checkpoint. The fifth had complained that he insisted on sitting near the public boat launch, another hold point. Dana sank onto the edge of a bench. We kept saying he wanted to run away. Owen shook his head. Maybe not. Micah traced the route with one finger. He was going back to work. The sentence changed the room. Not dramatically. Nothing moved. No one discovered something hidden beneath a floorboard. But Dana lowered her eyes as if the map had accused her of something more painful than neglect. She had cared. She had organized appointments, filled out forms, driven across town, bought food, found people willing to help. And every time Rook tried to return to the only routine he understood, they had interpreted it as another failure to settle. Micah looked away from her. That was when he saw the old village seal on a binder's spine. Winter Operations Safety Review. He knew the year before he pulled it free. 3 years earlier, his own report. The document had his name on the cover, Sergeant Micah Toland. Dana noticed the change in his face. What is that? Micah opened it. He remembered writing every recommendation. A volunteer snowmobile had lost radio contact during a fast-moving weather change. No one had been hurt, but the near miss exposed problems that had existed for years. Aging flotation equipment, inconsistent training records, unclear insurance coverage, several senior volunteers working beyond reasonable physical expectations. No unified communications protocol between volunteer teams and professional responders. Micah had recommended suspension until minimum standards were met. The language was clean, defensible, responsible. Owen read over his shoulder. You wrote this? Yes. Dana looked at Micah, then toward the signal board. This is what shut the team down? No. Micah closed the binder halfway. This is what recommended suspension. What's the difference? The village board decided whether to fund the fixes. And they didn't. No, Dana absorbed that. Micah reopened the report. He remembered the meeting, budget projections, insurance figures, a room full of people agreeing that volunteer goodwill did not replace safety standards. He still agreed. That was the uncomfortable part. He had not discovered some old mistake he could apologize for and correct. Given the same information, he might write the same report again. But Calvin had lost the volunteer team afterward. Rook had lost the structure built around that team. Then, Calvin's accident had removed the last person connecting the dog to the language on the wall. A correct decision had not been free. Micah had always understood consequences in the abstract. The boathouse gave them names. Owen closed the cabinet. You planning to blame yourself? No. Good. Micah looked at the board. I'm planning to stop pretending correct procedure means nobody pays for it. Owen nodded once. That answer satisfied him more. Later that afternoon, Micah met Mara at the municipal offices. She was seated at a conference table, surrounded by printed emergency diagrams, her deep teal cardigan bright against the gray walls. A tablet stood beside her coffee, covered in annotations. Micah placed a copy of Rook's signal board on the table. Mara looked at it. You found the dictionary. Part of one. He explained the route maps, the boundary checkpoint, the foster addresses. Mara listened without interrupting. So the dog wasn't refusing new homes, she said. Not exactly. He kept finding the old structure. That's our working theory. Mara leaned back. And now you know what he was trying to do at the intersection. We know what the behavior resembles. She smiled slightly. You really hate saying anything stronger than the evidence allows. It's kept me employed. It probably also makes birthday cards difficult." Micah almost smiled. Then he noticed the emergency response diagram spread across the table. "What are those?" "My review." She rotated one toward him. "Winter evacuation flow, police arrival, fire staging, portable alerts, transportation, backup communications." The plan was competent. Micah knew most of it. Mara tapped several boxes. "See the assumption?" "No. Almost every field instruction eventually turns into spoken direction. We have text alerts for initial notification, portable message boards at designated staging points. Officers can write instructions if needed, if they already know they need to." Micah leaned back. "We can't build a separate emergency system for every communication preference in town." Mara's expression sharpened. "Preference? You know what I mean?" "I do. That's why I'm correcting it." Micah felt irritation rise. "We have limited staff, limited equipment, limited time. In an emergency, we need systems people can learn quickly." "Agreed. Then what are you asking for?" "Redundancy." She pushed one of the diagrams toward him. "Visual direction where possible. Written backup. Consistent gestures for basic movement. Staff who know not to assume lack of response means refusal." Micah glanced at the photocopy of Rook's signal board between them. "This is about the dog now?" "No." Mara's answer came immediately. "That's why it matters." The room quieted. Outside the window, snow slid from the municipal roof in a soft sheet. Micah crossed his arms. "Police cannot have one system for every person." Mara met his eyes. "You don't need one system for every person." She tapped the emergency plan. "Just don't build one that only works for one kind of person." Micah looked at the diagram again. He did not agree with all of her recommendations. Not yet. Some would slow responders. Some would require training nobody had budgeted for. Some looked better in a consultant's report than they would in freezing wind at 2 in the morning. He told her so. Mara did not soften her position. Good. He was beginning to understand that agreement was not the same thing as communication either. Before leaving, Micah folded the copy of Calvin's signal board and slid it into his patrol folder beside his old safety assessment. 2 systems, 2 different years, both built for safety. One created by a man on frozen water because sound sometimes failed. The other written by a police sergeant because informal systems sometimes failed. Neither was foolish. Neither was complete. Micah closed the folder. For the first time since meeting Rook, he was no longer asking why the dog would not listen. He was wondering how many times people had mistaken a missing connection for disobedience simply because they were standing on the louder side of the conversation. At 7:42 on Thursday morning, the temperature outside Saranac Lake was 8 below zero and falling. By 7:51, 26 apartments at Pine Hollow Senior Residence had lost heat. The building itself had power in several common areas, but a fault at a nearby electrical distribution unit had cut service to the heating system and part of the residential wing. Maintenance had already called the utility company. The backup procedures were already moving. Nothing had failed completely. That became the problem. Sergeant Micah Tolland arrived to find 3 systems working at once and not quite agreeing with one another. The building's portable emergency speaker was directing residents toward the south entrance. A text alert sent 15 minutes earlier told them to gather at the same location. Fire personnel were checking apartment doors floor by floor. Then a snowplow clearing the access lane pushed a heavy ridge of snow across the south side turnaround, making it impossible for the warming bus to reach the designated pickup point. The staging location changed to the east parking area. A second text alert went out. Some phones received it immediately. Others did not. Micah stepped from his patrol SUV into air cold enough to make his lungs tighten. "East lot now," Fire Captain Lewis called from the entrance. "Bus can't reach south." Micah lifted his radio. "All units, evacuation staging moves east. Repeat, east parking lot." Acknowledgments came back through static. He started toward the building. A woman in a deep teal winter coat was already coming the other way. Mara Quinlan held a weather-resistant tablet against her chest and looked irritated enough that Micah knew the morning had already proved one of her points. "You were scheduled here today?" he asked. "Accessibility walkthrough at 8. Good timing." "Depends who you ask." She turned and pointed toward the lobby. Your speaker is still telling people south. Micah looked toward the portable unit near the doors. Facilities is changing it. They are trying. Through the glass, a maintenance worker crouched beside the control panel wearing gloves too thick for the small buttons. Micah keyed his radio again. Someone shut down the south entry message until it's updated. A patrol officer answered, working on it. Inside Pine Hollow, the temperature was still safe but dropping steadily. Residents filled the main corridor in winter coats, bathrobes beneath parkas, knit hats, slippers, snow boots, and expressions ranging from amusement to genuine worry. The staff had done what they were supposed to do. Door checks, resident roster, medication needs, mobility assistance, emergency notifications. But the change in staging location was spreading unevenly through the building. An aide guided a woman with a walker toward the east corridor. Another resident headed in the opposite direction because he had heard the original announcement. A firefighter redirected him. Behind them, someone shouted that the buses were outside. They were not. Micah raised his voice. Everyone heading to transportation, use the east exit. East exit. Several people turned. Several did not. Mara touched his elbow. He looked at her. She pointed toward 3 residents near the vending machines. One woman was watching the movement around her with clear confusion. Beside her, an older man wearing a navy cardigan beneath his coat kept looking from one doorway to another. They didn't get that, Mara said. How do you know? Because neither one looked at you. Micah glanced toward the residents. They may just be confused. That's what I said. She walked toward them. Micah followed. The older man was Harold Venn, 77, a retired print shop owner with a narrow face, silver hair combed carefully back, and hearing aids in both ears. One device was working. The other had apparently lost battery power sometime that morning. I was told south, Harold said. It changed, Micah replied. East lot. What changed? The bus location. Harold looked toward the south doors again. Why? Access is blocked. Someone called Micah's name from across the lobby. At the same moment, the portable speaker crackled and repeated the old south entrance instruction before a maintenance worker finally silenced it. Harold pointed at the speaker. That says south. Micah felt his patience pull tight. The speaker is outdated. Follow the officers. Harold's expression hardened. I am trying to. Mara stepped between the words before they became a problem. She opened a blank screen on her tablet and drew a large arrow. East exit. Bus. She turned it toward Harold. His shoulders dropped slightly. Oh. Mara drew an X over south. Harold nodded. Micah watched the transformation. Not dramatic. No grateful speech. Just confusion becoming information. A firefighter hurried over. Sergeant, east ramp's getting crowded. We need to meter people out. Micah turned. Keep one lane clear for wheelchairs. Hold everyone else inside until the first group boards. He started walking. Mara stayed with Harold. Outside, the east parking lot had become its own argument. The warming bus was backing carefully through packed snow. A police cruiser blocked civilian traffic. 2 firefighters were helping a resident down the ramp while an aide counted names from a clipboard. Micah positioned officers along the path. 20 at a time. Keep the ramp open. Nobody waits outside longer than necessary. Clear instructions. Short instructions. Exactly the kind he trusted. For several minutes they worked. Then another complication appeared. A second group came around the side of the building from the south entrance, following an employee who had not heard the staging change. Micah stepped forward. Stop there! The employee kept moving. The wind carried half the command away. Micah shouted again. Stop! The group hesitated but did not fully stop. At that moment, Owen Braith's animal control truck rolled slowly past the far edge of the lot. Micah stared. Owen lowered the window. Bad morning? What are you doing here? Behavioral field exercise. Quiet route exposure. Rook sat behind the passenger side barrier in a black working harness. Owen looked at the building. I can leave. Micah almost said yes. Then a fire lieutenant called from the ramp. Micah, hold that group. Micah turned. Without thinking, he raised one bare hand high, palm outward. A visual stop. The employee leading the second group saw it this time. She halted. So did the people behind her. And 20 yards away through the open side door of Owen's truck, Rook stood halfway up, then stopped. The German Shepherd's body settled instantly. eyes fixed on Micah's raised hand. Harold Venn had just emerged from the building beside Mara. He saw the dog. Then he saw Micah. Harold's attention shifted from the noise around him to the raised palm. He stopped too. For one strange second, the entire problem reduced itself to a shape: a hand in cold air, a dog waiting, a man watching the dog. Mara pointed Harold toward the clear lane and then toward the bus. Micah lowered his hand and pointed east. Harold followed. No shouting. No repeated explanation. He simply understood what movement came next. Rook had not rescued Harold. Rook had not guided anyone. The dog had done nothing more than respond predictably to information he recognized. That was enough. Micah looked at Mara. She had seen the whole thing. She did not smile. That somehow made the lesson harder to dismiss. "Give me your tablet," Micah said. Mara handed it over. Micah wrote in block letters, "Wait here. Bus east." He gave the tablet to Officer Phelps. "Hold this where people coming out can see it." Phelps nodded. Micah pointed toward another officer. "Grab the dry erase board from the command kit. Big arrows. South closed. East staging. Then to the firefighter near the ramp. Use the same palm-out stop if you need the lane held. Don't wave people around." Mara folded her arms. "You're standardizing. I'm improvising. Those are cousins." He ignored that. Within 10 minutes, the flow improved. Not perfectly. A woman still went back for her purse. One resident refused to board until someone found his cat carrier. A staff member had to call a daughter to confirm medication instructions. The second warming bus arrived late because a delivery van had become stuck on an adjoining street. Real emergencies did not become elegant because someone learned a lesson, but fewer people asked where they were supposed to go. Large handwritten arrows appeared at corridor intersections. Police officers used a consistent palm-out signal to hold movement while wheelchair users passed. Firefighters pointed deliberately instead of gesturing vaguely. Staff repeated written destination information alongside verbal instructions. Micah noticed something else. The changes did not slow them down. Not much. That bothered him in a useful way. He had spent 2 days arguing that every additional communication method would add complexity. Some did. Others removed it. By 9:36, Pine Hollow's residents had been transferred to 2 heated municipal facilities while utility crews worked on the electrical problem. Nobody had been seriously harmed. No one department had failed. The incident would probably earn only a few lines in the local paper. That afternoon, Micah stood in the municipal command room with a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold. Mara sat across from him, reviewing notes. "You're enjoying this," he said. "I haven't said anything. That's how I know." She looked up. "Would you prefer I say I told you so?" "No, I can write it." He almost laughed. His phone vibrated before he could answer. "Owen." Micah stepped into the hallway. "What've you got?" "The behavior report." Micah straightened. The independent veterinary behaviorist, Dr. Celeste Warren, had completed her initial assessment after reviewing Rook's records, observing him in controlled conditions, and comparing his responses to the recovered visual command material. Owen summarized. No neurological concerns, hearing functional, no generalized aggression pattern observed. Micah let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "But?" "There's always a but," Owen continued. "His visual behaviors are deeply conditioned. He works off body position, hand cues, environmental markers, routine. Warren says putting him with handlers who don't understand that system can create predictable misunderstandings. Meaning? Meaning he's not inherently unsafe. But that doesn't make every placement safe." Micah leaned against the wall. "Fair. Almost inconveniently fair. What about the complaint? Still goes where it goes. Report helps. Doesn't erase the fact that 2 people reasonably believed a large dog was blocking them." Micah looked through the command room glass at Mara's notes covering the table. "What else?" A pause. "I got a call from Northridge Working Dog Center in Vermont." Micah said nothing. "They have an opening. Structured rehabilitation, experienced handlers, controlled placement afterward. That far? About 3 hours. And Calvin? That's the problem." Micah already understood. The facility might be the safest administrative answer. It might also remove Rook from the only community, roots, and person that gave his behavior context. "Dana know?" "I called her first." "What does she think?" "She thinks it may be the responsible choice." Micah looked down the hall. At the far end, someone had leaned the dry erase board from Pine Hollow against the wall. A thick arrow still pointed iced. He had spent years believing responsibility meant choosing the option with the fewest uncontrolled variables. That morning had shown him another possibility. Sometimes safety did not require removing complexity. Sometimes it required understanding it well enough to manage it. "When's the hearing?" Micah asked. 4 days. And if we want him kept local, we need more than a theory about hand signals. Owen's voice became quieter. "We need a management plan." Micah looked through the glass again. Mara was still working. On the table beside her sat Calvin's copied signal chart. 2 different communication systems. One municipal, one built between a man and a dog, both incomplete on their own. Micah picked up his cold coffee. "For once," he said, "I think I know what the question is." Owen waited. Micah looked at the arrow pointing east. "Not whether Rook can prove he belongs here." He paused. "Whether we can prove we know how to let him." Micah's proposal fit on 4 pages. Owen Braith read it twice and disliked the title. "Temporary Visual Handling Protocol sounds like something you'd use for hazardous machinery." Micah looked across the Animal Control Office. "Do you have a better one? Teach people not to confuse the dog." Mara Quinlan, seated beside the printer with a stack of laminated cards, lifted one eyebrow. "I'd approve that." Micah ignored both of them. The hearing was 3 days away. North Ridge Working Dog Center still had space available if local placement failed, and nobody in the room believed goodwill would be enough to argue against a structured facility with trained handlers. They needed evidence that Rook could function safely with more than one person. Not perfectly, predictably. That distinction mattered. Calvin had agreed after Mara brought the proposal to the rehabilitation center. His answer had arrived on a photograph of his whiteboard. "Train them." Then, underneath, "Don't replace me." Micah understood the concern better than he had expected. If Rook merely transferred his dependence from Calvin to Micah, they would not have solved anything. They would have created the same fragile arrangement with a different man standing at the center. So Mara stripped the system down. Not all 20 commands. 6. Stop, wait, come down, read, turn safe. Home was deliberately absent. "That one stays Calvin's," Mara said. Dana Sutter looked at the blank space where the command might have gone. Micah did not argue. The first training session took place in a fenced exercise yard behind Animal Control under a pale winter sun. Owen brought in 2 of his regular handlers. Tessa Rowe was 29, compact and energetic, with dark curly hair tucked under a knit cap and the instinctive confidence of someone accustomed to dogs making decisions faster than people. Malik Dorsey, 34, was taller and quieter, with rectangular glasses and a habit of watching an animal for several seconds before moving toward it. Officer Eric Phelps volunteered from Micah's department. Officer Lena Voss did not volunteer exactly. Micah assigned her because she had complained that visual signals looked easy enough. He considered that educational. Dr. Celeste Warren joined them from the edge of the yard. The veterinary behaviorist was in her mid-40s, with silver beginning at the temples of her dark hair and a charcoal winter coat zipped to the throat. She carried no clipboard during the exercises. "I'm watching the dog," she said when Micah asked. "Not us? You'll tell me enough about yourselves." Rook entered with Owen. Black working harness, brass tag, right ear carrying its familiar notch. The German shepherd looked around the yard, checked the gate, studied the people, then settled beside Owen. No excitement, no visible worry, just assessment. Mara demonstrated stop, palm visible, elbow relaxed, body squared. "No waving," she said, "no extra flourish. The signal needs to look like itself every time." Phelps went first. He gave the cue. Rook stopped. Phelps smiled. "That's not hard." "Never say that during training," Owen said. Phelps tried weight. He lifted his arm too high and added a small backward sweep. Rook stood there. Phelps repeated it. "Nothing. Wait." Still nothing. Mara held up one finger. "You've now given him 3 different versions. I gave him the same command. You said the same word. That's what she pointed toward Rook. Not to him." Phelps stared at the dog, then tried again, this time copying the cleaner movement. Rook waited. Malik followed. His gestures were smaller, more deliberate. Rook responded to 4 of the 6 commands on the first attempt. Tessa was too fast. She anticipated Rook's movement and began signaling the next action before the first had finished. Rook slowed. "Doctor." Warren finally spoke. "Look at his mouth." Tessa stopped. Rook had begun licking his lips. "Stress?" Micah asked. "Mild uncertainty," Warren said. "Could become stress if everyone keeps making him solve human inconsistency." Tessa nodded immediately. "My fault, not fault. Information." That phrase stayed with Micah. Lena Voss stepped forward next. She was competent, physically confident, and expressive with her hands when she talked. That became the problem. "Come," Lena said while giving the cue, then pointed toward the place she wanted Rook to stop. Rook took 2 steps. Lena gestured again. He stopped. She rotated her hand. Rook sat. "That wasn't sit," Lena said. Mara smiled. "It was apparently close enough." Lena looked offended. "I talk with my hands. Rook has noticed." Even Owen laughed. They reset. This time Mara asked Lena to put her non-commanding hand in her jacket pocket. "Feels ridiculous. To you?" Lena tried come again, one clean movement. Rook crossed the yard and stopped in front of her. Lena's face changed. The victory was small enough that nobody applauded. That was good. They were not teaching Rook tricks. They were teaching people to stop filling communication with unnecessary noise. Micah took his turn last. Rook responded quickly to him. Too quickly. Micah saw Owen notice, so did Dr. Warren. "That's what Calvin was worried about," she said. Micah lowered his hand. "He's anticipating me. He's reading you well. Same problem. Potentially." Micah looked toward the others. "Then I shouldn't be primary." Owen nodded. "That's the point." For the rest of the session, Micah stepped back. It was harder than giving commands. That surprised him. Dana watched from beside the fence. She had brought the cognac folio, but had not opened it once. When training ended, Rook drank from a water bowl while Tessa and Malik compared notes. Dana stayed where she was. "I did everything fast," she said. Micah turned toward her. "What?" "When Calvin got hurt." Her eyes remained on Rook. "The ambulance took him. Somebody called me about Rook. I drove to Calvin's place, packed food, found the vaccination folder, put the dog in my car." She rubbed her thumb along the edge of the leather folio. "The first foster woman met me outside her house. Micah waited. I walked Rook to her car. She opened the back. I put him in." Dana swallowed. "Then I left before he saw me cry." There was no accusation in Micah's face. Dana seemed to need one anyway. "I thought Quick was kinder." Rook lifted his head across the yard. Dana continued. "Calvin was there one morning. Then he wasn't. His house was there. Then strangers started taking Rook to different places." Her voice thinned. "And every time a placement failed, I moved him again." Micah looked at the dog. No goodbye, no explanation Rook could understand. No final command closing the old routine. Dana had not abandoned him. But from Rook's side of the leash, perhaps disappearance and abandonment had looked painfully similar. "I kept thinking he needed a house," she said. Micah looked back at her. "He probably did." Dana gave a humorless laugh. "That isn't what he was asking for." Later that afternoon, Owen drove Rook to Adirondack Valley Rehabilitation Center. Micah followed in his patrol SUV. Dana met them there. The visit had been cleared in advance with Calvin's care team. It was not part of the dangerous dog hearing. Not evidence, not a demonstration. Dr. Warren had insisted on that. "This is for the dog and the owner," she said. "Not your paperwork." Calvin was waiting beyond the therapy garden doors. His progress was visible before Micah noticed anything else. The graphite walker was gone. Calvin stood with a cane in his left hand, weight still carefully distributed, shoulders thinner than they had probably been before the accident, but straighter than during Micah's first visit. His right hand was free. Rook entered the corridor beside Owen. The dog saw Calvin and stopped. No bark, no pulling, no burst of movement. Every part of Rook became still. Calvin's face changed first. His mouth tightened beneath the white mustache. His right hand rose, palm angled, safe. Rook sat. The movement was immediate, but something about it did not feel like obedience. It felt like recognition. Calvin lowered the cane carefully and moved nearer. Rook remained seated. Then Calvin touched his own chest. His hand moved outward. Home. Rook stood. Owen released the leash only after Calvin's therapist nodded. Rook crossed the remaining distance slowly, not running, not performing. At Calvin's knees, the German shepherd lowered his head. Calvin rested his palm against the dark fur between Rook's ears. For several seconds, Nobody in the corridor found a useful reason to speak. Then Rook pushed his forehead against Calvin's hand. Dana turned away. Micah did not. He had spent the week thinking Rook needed a handler who understood him. Watching Calvin, Micah realized how incomplete that idea was. Rook did not merely understand Calvin. He located himself through Calvin. The difference mattered. That evening, Dr. Warren approved one controlled overnight evaluation at Micah's house, not as a future adoption, as data. Micah repeated that distinction enough times that Owen eventually stopped answering him. Rook entered Micah's small two-story house shortly after 7. He inspected the kitchen, the living room, the stairs, the back door. Micah kept everything simple. One bowl, one bed near the living room, no toys piled around him. No attempt to manufacture affection. Rook ate when released. He responded to before crossing the kitchen doorway. He lay down when Micah asked with the proper visual cue. When Micah removed the harness, Rook allowed him to check the collar and run 2 fingers beneath it. Calm, predictable, easy if one knew what easy actually required. By 11, snow had started falling outside. Micah shut off the downstairs lights and went halfway up the stairs. He looked back. The dog bed was empty. Rook was lying beside the front door, chest against the floor, head resting between his paws. Not distressed, not restless, waiting. Micah sat down on the 3rd stair. "You know," he said softly, "there's a perfectly good bed 6 feet away." Rook's ear moved toward his voice. His eyes stayed on the door. Micah should have felt pleased. The evaluation was going well. Rook was manageable, quiet, responsive, safe inside the house. Instead, Micah found himself imagining what it would be like if the brass tag stayed on a hook near his own door. Morning walks. A dog beside the patrol SUV on days off. Dark sable hair on the furniture despite rules against it. The thought arrived so naturally that Micah disliked himself for liking it. He rested his forearms on his knees. Across the dark hallway, Rook continued facing the door. Micah understood then why Calvin had been so specific. "Don't replace me." The danger had never been that Micah would deliberately take Calvin's place. The danger was that Rook was becoming easy for Micah to understand, and Micah was beginning to enjoy being understood in return. Outside, snow softened the street until even the passing cars became quiet. Rook stayed beside the door. Micah stayed on the stairs. For the first time, wanting the dog and doing what was right for him had become 2 different things. The snow squall arrived faster than the forecast. At 4:11 p.m., Micah could still see the dark line of pines on the far side of Lake Flower. At 4:26, they were gone. Wind drove snow horizontally across the road, turning headlights into pale smears and swallowing distance, until a parked truck 50 yards away looked like something remembered rather than seen. The first highway collision happened north of town. Then a second vehicle stopped sideways behind it. Traffic diverted. Within 20 minutes, roads around Lake Flower began filling with drivers searching for alternate routes, while police, fire crews, public works, and emergency medical teams tried to keep access lanes open. Micah's radio never became useless. That would have been simpler. It became crowded. Updates overlapped. Units stepped on one another. Static buried the beginning of transmissions and wind buried the ends whenever someone spoke outside a vehicle. Micah stood inside Calvin's old boathouse, looking at a map pinned across a folding table. The building had been reopened temporarily as a staging point because it offered heat, shoreline access, equipment storage, and enough room for multiple agencies, without crowding the downtown station. 3 years earlier, Micah had written the report that helped shut down the volunteer operation based there. Now he was assigning people inside the same room. The irony did not require commentary. "County wants Route 8 kept clear for emergency traffic," Officer Lena Voss said. "Then civilian diversion stays west. The west turn is backing up. Public Works is clearing Maple. Radio says 10 minutes. Micah looked through the window. In this weather, 10 minutes was not a unit of time he trusted. Mara Quinlan stood at the other end of the table, writing assignments on a dry erase board rather than relying on radio distribution alone. West Route, Police. Shoreline, Fire, Ice Team. Equipment transfer, Boathouse North Door. She had added large arrows beneath each instruction. No speech about accessibility, no argument. It was simply part of the plan now. Micah noticed that and kept working. Outside, 2 officers used flashlight cues to guide arriving vehicles into separate lanes. The signals were simple enough to remain visible through blowing snow. Steady beam for hold, deliberate sweep for move, repeated downward flash to slow. Nothing clever, nothing complicated, just another way for information to survive when sound did not. The old volunteer ice rescue crew arrived in pieces. Not all of them. Calvin's former team had aged, moved away, or stopped working winter response entirely. But 3 men and 1 woman who still maintained current training agreed to assist under the official incident structure. The oldest was Walter Keene, 63, a retired utility lineman with a compact frame, a weathered face, and white eyebrows so thick that snow made them look twice their size. Walter wore a bright yellow rescue shell over modern flotation gear and had already corrected 2 younger firefighters on where the old shoreline access dipped beneath drifting snow. "You used to work with Calvin?" Micah asked. Long enough to know he hated anybody calling him captain. What did he prefer? Calvin. Walter pulled on a glove. Complicated system. Then he stepped back outside. Micah almost smiled. Owen arrived with Rook shortly before 5. The German shepherd remained on lead in a black working harness, dark sable coat gathering white along the shoulders. Micah frowned when he saw them. "I didn't request the dog." "I know. Then why is he here?" Owen shut the boathouse door behind him. "We were at the county facility when they called for extra transport support. I brought equipment." Rook stays controlled. Micah looked at the dog. Rook looked at his hands. That no longer unsettled him, not in the same way. "Fine," Micah said. "No freelancing." Owen gave him a dry look. "That instruction for me or him?" "Both." For the next hour, Rook mostly did nothing. That was exactly what Micah wanted. He waited beside Owen while responders carried flotation bags and rope packs through the north door. He shifted when Owen shifted, held when told to hold, ignored engines, ignored shouting, ignored the gusts slamming loose snow against the siding. Outside, the storm kept creating small problems. A delivery truck became stuck near the west diversion. A resident called about a snowmobile abandoned close to shore. 2 drivers ignored a barricade because navigation apps continued sending them toward a road that had already been closed. Micah coordinated. Mara updated boards. Lena handled the road units. Walter and the volunteer crew advised the fire team on shoreline access. Nobody became a hero. Everybody became useful. That mattered more. Near 6, a utility request came through for portable lighting equipment to be moved from the boathouse to a secondary staging position farther along the shoreline road. The usual vehicle path was blocked by drifting snow. Walter studied the old patrol map. "We can hand transfer along the short route." Micah traced it. "Here? Used to be." Used to be isn't enough. Shore section stays on land for most of it. Most? Walter pointed to a narrow bend where the old route passed close to the lake edge. Calvin used a hard boundary there whenever conditions changed. Micah looked toward the blowing white beyond the window. "Can we verify it?" "Not from here." The equipment was not urgent enough to justify guessing. Micah assigned a small team to check the route first. Walter, Owen, 2 firefighters. Micah went with them. Rook remained on lead beside Owen. Mara caught Micah at the door and handed him a laminated card. On it were only 3 thick symbols. Stop, return. Change moot. Micah looked at her. "We know those. You do now." He slid the card into his jacket. Outside, speaking became nearly pointless. The wind tore sentences apart. Micah switched automatically to signals. Palm out. Hold. 2 fingers forward. Move. Flashlight sweep toward the next visible marker. The team progressed slowly along the side of the boathouse. Snow reached mid-calf in places. Walter moved ahead far enough to identify old landmarks, but never out of visual contact. Rook walked beside Owen without pulling. At the first turn, Micah signaled forward. The team moved. At the second, they stopped to clear snow from a trail marker. Walter pointed left. Micah checked the map under the clear cover strapped to his forearm. Correct. He signaled forward again. Walter moved. The firefighters followed. Owen stepped. Rook did not. Owen stopped immediately. Micah turned. Rook stood with all 4 feet planted, not frightened, not distracted. Micah lifted the forward signal again. The German shepherd watched him, did not move. Owen looked down at the dog. Micah felt the old instinct arrive. It was not anger. Something more automatic than that. Command given. Command understood, command not followed. For most of his career, that sequence had required an explanation quickly. Micah took one step back toward Rook. The dog's attention remained on his hand. Micah lowered it. Then he looked at the ground. 3 inches above the snow beside Rook's front paw was a dark wooden tip. Barely visible, Walter came back. He brushed snow away with his glove. More wood appeared, then a faded strip of orange paint. Walter stopped moving. "What?" Micah asked. Walter stared at the stake. "Haven't seen one of these in years." "Boundary?" Walter nodded. "Calvin's hard stop." He pointed toward the white space ahead. "That section used to collect overflow after rapid temperature changes. Water pushes over the top of the ice, then snow hides it." Micah looked toward the route. Nothing appeared different. White ground, white air, no dramatic crack, no visible warning. Just winter making one surface look like another. Micah signaled everyone back. The fire team checked the area from the safer edge using proper equipment. Several minutes later, Walter returned. Slush under the crust. Water intrusion farther out. Could the equipment team cross? Not carrying weight. Micah nodded. Then they don't. No debate. No attempt to prove the map was right. No frustration at the dog. Micah pointed back toward the boathouse. Return. Rook turned with Owen. They found another route. It took 14 minutes longer. No one complained. Back inside, Mara looked up when they entered. "Problem? Old route isn't usable." Walter shook snow from his hood. "Dog remembered the boundary better than we did." Micah removed his gloves. "Training remembered it." Owen looked at him. Micah continued. "He saw the marker, recognized the location, or both. We don't know which." Walter smiled faintly. "Still sounds like remembering." "Fine." Micah took the revised route map and drew a heavy X across the old shoreline section. "Remembering." That was all. There was no applause. No one took a photograph. 30 seconds later, Lena asked about another road closure, and Micah went back to work. By 8, the highway scene had stabilized. By 9:30, stranded motorists had been redirected or transported to warming locations. The radio became quiet enough that people stopped speaking over one another. The snow continued, but without the same force. One by one, teams cleared the boathouse. Walter left after updating the shoreline notes. Mara carried the communication boards to a municipal vehicle. Owen went outside to help reload gear. Rook remained inside for the moment, lying near the old workbench. Micah finally sat. The room looked different from the day he first entered with Dana and Owen. Same ropes, same shelves, same signal board, but no longer a preserved room waiting for Calvin to return. For a few hours it had worked again. Not as it used to. Something new had occupied the old structure without pretending the past could simply be restored. Rook lifted his head. Micah looked at the board. Wait, return, search, boundary, safe, home. His attention stopped on the final word. He thought about Calvin, about the rehabilitation hallway, about Rook pressing his forehead beneath the older man's hand, about his own house and the German shepherd sleeping beside the front door. Micah knew he should leave the command alone. Perhaps that was why he tried it. He stood, touched his chest, moved the hand outward in the pattern Calvin had shown. Home. Rook watched. Nothing happened. Micah repeated it more cleanly. Rook's ears tipped forward. Still nothing. The dog did not approach, did not become confused, did not refuse dramatically. He simply remained where he was. Micah stared at him for several seconds. Then a quiet laugh escaped him. Right. Rook's tail touched the floor once. Micah sat again. For weeks he had interpreted home as another instruction in Calvin's visual vocabulary. A destination cue. A recall with emotional weight. But perhaps he had misunderstood it for the same reason everyone had misunderstood Rook at the beginning. He had assumed the meaning existed inside the movement itself. It did not. Home meant something because Calvin had spent years giving the signal inside a life they shared. A kitchen, a shoreline, a truck, a boathouse, a man. Micah could reproduce the gesture perfectly. He could not reproduce its history. And for once that did not feel like failure. Micah leaned back against the wall. Outside, the last snowplow passed slowly along the road, amber lights washing across the frosted window. Rook lowered his head again. You don't belong to whoever gives the clearest command, Micah said. One ear moved. That would have been convenient. The dog settled. Micah looked once more at home on the board. Then he stopped trying to make the signal mean him. For most of his career, Micah had measured good communication by whether the other person did what came next. Tonight he understood something harder. Sometimes the clearest answer was the one that did not move toward you. The hearing lasted 43 minutes. No cameras waited outside. No reporter sat in the back row. The municipal courtroom was small enough that Micah could hear the heating pipes knock behind the paneled wall whenever the room went quiet. Rook was not present. Judge Elaine Mercer had made that decision before the hearing began. There was no reason to bring a large German shepherd into a crowded municipal room simply to prove something that could be shown through records, video, and professional testimony. Micah appreciated that. Too much of Rook's recent life had already involved people asking him to demonstrate what kind of dog he was. Owen Braith sat at one table with the animal control file. Dana Sutter sat behind him with her cognac leather folio open across her knees. Dr. Celeste Warren had provided her written behavioral assessment and appeared by video for questions. Micah sat in uniform with his incident report in front of him. The complainant from the intersection had come with his adult daughter. Neither looked angry. That mattered too. Judge Mercer was in her late 50s. Silver blonde hair cut close at the jaw, reading glasses low on her nose, and the calm voice of someone who had spent years listening to people confuse certainty with evidence. She watched the phone video twice, the first time without interruption, the second with Owen explaining the documented boundary behavior from Calvin's old training records. Judge Mercer paused the image at the moment Rook turned across the pedestrian's path. "You are not saying the dog knew there was ice behind them?" "No, Your Honor," Owen said. Micah almost smiled. "They had repeated that sentence enough times to make it part of the case," Owen continued. "We are saying the movement is consistent with a trained boundary-blocking behavior at a documented former checkpoint." "And the surface condition?" Micah answered. Black ice was present beneath fresh snow in the direction the pedestrians were moving. Judge Mercer looked at him. "Does that change your assessment of the dog's intent?" "I can't state intent." "Good." She glanced back at the report. "What can you state?" Micah answered without looking down. "The dog approached quickly, stopped before physical contact, positioned himself across the route, and did not pursue when the pedestrian stepped back." The complainant shifted in his chair. Judge Mercer turned toward him. "Sir, none of this means your concern was unreasonable." The man nodded. "I know." His daughter spoke next. "I don't want anything bad to happen to the dog." She looked toward Dana. "I just don't want somebody else to misunderstand him the same way we did." That sentence did more useful work than outrage would have. Dr. Warren's assessment was equally restrained. Rook showed no pattern of generalized aggression. His hearing was functional. His responses were strongly conditioned around visual cues, environmental routines, and handler body position. He was capable of working with multiple trained handlers, but placement with someone unfamiliar with those behaviors could recreate the same confusion that had already produced 6 failed foster arrangements. Judge Mercer removed her glasses. "So the dog is not unmanageable?" "No," Warren said. "But casual placement would be irresponsible." "Yes." The judge nodded. That was the entire case in 2 sentences. When she gave her decision, nobody celebrated. Rook would not be designated a dangerous dog based on the evidence presented. The complaint would remain part of the documented history. Animal control would retain oversight during transition. Any permanent placement required a written management plan, identified backup handler, veterinary follow-up, and proof that the primary caretaker could safely use the visual command system. Most importantly, Rook would not be passed through another sequence of temporary homes while people searched for a convenient fit. Judge Mercer looked toward Dana. "Your uncle still owns the dog?" "Yes." "And intends to resume care if medically able?" Dana nodded. "That has always been the goal." "Then build toward that goal." The gavel never came down dramatically. Judge Mercer simply closed the folder. Next case. Outside the courtroom, Dana leaned against the hallway wall. For a moment, Micah thought she might cry. Instead, she laughed, a tired, disbelieving little laugh. "I brought 87 pages." Owen looked at the folio. "You used 12. I hate efficiency." Micah looked toward the courthouse windows. Snow was falling lightly, not a storm, just January, continuing. The ruling solved the legal question. It did not solve the practical one. That took another 3 weeks. Calvin's rehabilitation team approved him for supported independent living, but not for the old rental house near Sandbridge Road. Stairs, winter maintenance, and distance from services made that unrealistic. Dana found a supported apartment near Lake Flower with an elevator, accessible entrance, and written permission for Rook. The first time she showed Calvin the lease, he read the pet section twice, then wrote on his whiteboard, "He pays no rent." Dana answered, "He has no income." Calvin wrote, "Freeloader." Dana took a photograph and sent it to Micah. Micah kept it. Owen built the transition protocol with the seriousness of a man arranging a small military operation while insisting that it was not one. Rook would return gradually. Calvin would remain primary owner. Tessa Rowe from Animal Control agreed to serve as backup handler for the first several months. A local volunteer would handle long exercise walks on days Calvin's strength was limited. Doctor Warren scheduled follow-up evaluations. Dana committed to visiting every weekend and managing transportation to veterinary appointments when needed. Mara completed the visual command guide, 6 public handling cues, several contextual cues, clear diagrams, no unnecessary decoration. Home remained absent. When Micah asked if that was intentional, Mara looked at him over the edge of the laminated packet. "You already know the answer." He did. The changes elsewhere in town were quieter. Micah submitted an amendment to the winter response procedures. He did not propose replacing radios. He did not ask every officer to learn sign language. He asked for redundancy. Portable visual boards in command kits. Written staging cards, accessibility prompts on evacuation checklists. A handful of standardized nonverbal movement cues for noisy or low visibility conditions. The proposal went through revisions. Fire wanted different flashlight language. Public Works objected to one board size because it would not fit certain trucks. Budget staff cut 2 items. Mara put one back. That felt more believable to Micah than unanimous approval. The old volunteer rescue program did not return. It could not. The insurance problems had been real. The equipment standards had been real. The missing coordination protocols had been real. Instead, the village reopened the boathouse as the winter safety annex. Police, fire, accessibility staff, Public Works, certified volunteers, shared equipment, shared training. A room that had once belonged to one system became useful because nobody tried to pretend that system had been perfect. Walter Keene saw the new sign and complained that annex sounded like a place where taxes were invented. Mara told him he could submit a naming proposal. Walter declined immediately. Calvin laughed so hard when Dana told him that he had to put down his coffee. The day Calvin left rehabilitation arrived under a wide blue sky. Snowbanks shone along the road. The air was cold but still. Micah drove Rook there himself. No official reason remained for him to do it. Owen could have handled the transfer. Dana could have taken the dog. Tessa was already certified as backup. Micah did not explain why he volunteered. Nobody asked. Rook sat in the rear of the SUV, wearing his black working harness and old brass tag. Micah parked beside the rehabilitation entrance and got out. Dana stood near the curb in her forest green coat. Owen held the transition folder beneath one arm. No television van, no crowd, no speech. The automatic doors opened. Calvin came through slowly, cane in his left hand, dark burgundy sweater beneath a navy quilted vest. His gait was careful, but each step belonged to him. Rook stood, every part of the dog focused forward. Micah held the leash loosely. Calvin reached the cleared section of walkway. Stopped. For several seconds neither man moved. Then Calvin raised his right hand, touched his chest, extended it outward. Home. Micah felt the leash tighten, not hard, just enough. He looked down at Rook. The German shepherd looked at Calvin. Micah opened his hand. The leash slipped free. Rook ran, not wildly, not with the frantic energy of a dog escaping confinement. He crossed the snowy walkway with purpose, slowing before Calvin so the older man would not have to brace against the impact. Then Rook pressed his shoulder against Calvin's legs. Calvin bent as far as his balance allowed and placed one hand along the shepherd's neck. Rook lifted his face. Calvin touched the notch in the right ear. Dana covered her mouth. Owen stared very seriously at the transfer folder. Micah stood beside the empty leash. The loss arrived exactly as he had expected. That did not make it smaller. For weeks, Rook had been part of his days, the quiet presence beside an animal control fence, the dog watching his hands, the overnight evaluation, snow at the boathouse, the unanswered home signal. Micah had learned the difference between understanding an animal and being chosen by it. Knowing the lesson did not protect him from wanting the other ending. Calvin looked across the walkway. Their eyes met. He raised one hand again. Not a command for Rook, just a thank you. Micah nodded. That was enough. Rook did not look back when Calvin and Dana entered the vehicle that would take them to the supported apartment. Micah watched them leave. For a brief second, the old instinct in him wanted that to hurt more than it did. Then he understood why it didn't. Rook was not abandoning him. The dog was finally no longer waiting. A few weeks later, Micah drove along Lake Flower during an afternoon patrol. Snow fell in slow, loose flakes. The Winter Safety Annex stood near the shoreline with a new sign beside the entrance and fresh reflective markers along the access route. Through the windshield, Micah saw Calvin sitting on a bench outside, cane beside him, heavy coat zipped high. Rook lay in the snow near his boots, dark sable body unmistakable against the white ground. Micah slowed. Rook lifted his head before the patrol SUV reached the entrance. Amber-brown eyes found the vehicle. Then Micah. Micah lowered the window. He did not call the dog's name, did not whistle, did not ask Rook to come. He lifted one bare hand. Palm open, clean movement, safe. Rook's ears softened. His tail swept once across the snow. Then he lowered his head again beside Calvin. Micah smiled. He raised the window and continued along the lake. 23 years in police work had taught him how to make people stop, how to clear a room, how to give instructions under pressure, how to recognize when a situation required control. A German shepherd who once refused to move when Micah expected him to had taught him something his training manuals never had. Silence was not always resistance. Difference was not always defiance. And being understood did not create ownership. Sometimes the most important thing a person could do after learning another being's language was use it to say, "You are safe. You are understood. You can go home." Sometimes doing the right thing does not feel like winning. Micah learned that understanding Rook did not give him the right to keep him. It gave him the responsibility to listen more carefully, to respect what the dog was trying to say, and finally to help him return to the person he still called home. Life asks the same of us. We may not always hear people in the way we expect, and love does not always mean holding on. Sometimes grace looks like making room, paying closer attention, and choosing what is right even when it costs us something. If this story stayed with you, share what it meant to you in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about loyalty, courage, and the quiet choices that reveal who we are, subscribe to the channel. May you have the wisdom to listen beyond words, and the peace to let love guide what you do next.